Thank you, Kermit. We are going to take a quick break, and we will start again at 2:40. So we'll see you in a little bit. There are restrooms right out the right doors, and then there are snacks and beverages to the left. Thank you.
And I have to say, I really appreciated it. But I wanted to give you a quick update from the numbers that Kermit gave you regarding where we are as a state for education attainment. So the latest numbers we have from 2021 for 25 to 64-year-olds, we're at 62.1% in terms of our education attainment goal. So that's for, we should get a round of applause. So that's for associates, bachelors, our vocational certificate training programs, and training certification. So that would include registered apprenticeship completers, that kind of thing. So actually making good progress. So with that, I am joined by an esteemed panel today. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves and give you a little bit of their background. And then also, when you're giving your introductions, I'm going to ask you to talk about the impact of the pandemic on your workforce and the most important lesson you learned as a leader during that time. So we'll start with Dr. Remy.
All right, thanks, Beth. So I'm Lisa Ramey, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director for School Administrators of Iowa, and I'm just finishing my 4th month. So if you don't know School Administrators of Iowa, we are a membership organization who serves the administrators across the state of Iowa. So we provide professional learning, we advocate on behalf of our administrators, we have an attorney on staff, and provide high-quality mentoring for our new administrators across the state. So, and most recently, it's probably important to know that I served as a superintendent. I've had different administrative roles over my career, but most recently, superintendent for West Des Moines Community Schools. Lessons that I learned. Well, first off, I always knew how important it was to listen to all voices, but throughout the pandemic, it was even heightened. So not only voices of our administrative team, of course, the Board of Education, but parents, as well as the students, and so how we moved forward. I would also say that it became quite clear that not only do we need to serve the academic needs of our students, but that we need to be thinking about the social-emotional needs of our students as well as our staff. And then finally, I'd say the importance of technology, not just in the sense of knowing how to use technology, but for those who didn't have access to technology. So how could we quickly pivot to ensure that we had all students and staff covered for the access to technology?
Great. Grace?
My name is Grace Swanson, and I have been blessed by working at AccuMold. I'm the Vice President of Human Capital. AccuMold is in Ankeny, and if you know anyone with a hearing aid, they might have a little AccuMold part in it or a pacemaker. We do a lot for eye surgery. About 70% of our business is in the medical field. My background is in applied behavioral science, social work, but I've been in manufacturing for 35 plus years. This is my first stint in HR, so it's been really interesting to see manufacturing from a different light. In terms of the pandemic, we, because of the medical products that we make, we're considered what was the term there? Essential. An essential, that's right. And boy, did we do a lot of research on essential. And our employees did even more when we said we weren't sending them to work from home, which is a very difficult thing to do in the manufacturing area. So we ended up sending 50 of our 350 employees to work from home. And what I didn't realize at the time was that that was really setting a new mental model for what work was going to be. And now, a few years later, we find that it's really difficult to find those office positions because people want to work from home now. It's a very different approach. And I think that was one of the critical things. I also learned how great it was to have a good sewing machine when I hauled it to work and made, 350 masks for folks. So we really had to rely on everybody's talents in all different ways. And of course, I don't know about your organizations, but our employees had all different kinds of opinion on what 6 foot was and whether a mask was needed or wasn't needed. So it was really important to keep your sense of humor during all of that.
Great. And Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Olinger. I'm with the Willis Auto Group here in Des Moines. Willis Automotive, we have 9 new car franchises. I'm actually the service manager for Jaguar, Land Rover, and Volvo. We couldn't work from home, or at my business, unfortunately. We had to keep cars on the road. The pandemic has hit us hard with supply chain issues on the service side, and fixing our guest cars, not at a very efficient rate, especially during the time of a pandemic where everybody were keeping their cars. And that also segues into new cars. It hit us because we could not get new cars. In fact, 4 months ago, 4 of our franchises had 0 brand new cars to sell. So that's really crazy. When we sell 500, 600 cars a month. What I learned from this pandemic is to love on our employees and take care of our employees. And they're so important to our business, and that's what I learned.
So why are we starting off our conversation about the future world of work talking about the pandemic when everybody wants to just pretend like it didn't happen or it's over? Well, because the pandemic was the single most disruptive force we have ever seen in terms of workforce outside of World War I and II in our lifetimes, and probably will ever see again, because as most of you remember, we literally went from situation normal on March 15th to everybody's completely shut down, and the world of work changed dramatically on March 16th. I can remember having a conversation with our staff in early 2020 saying, well, I guess this pandemic thing might affect us. Maybe we should talk about it a little bit. Totally unbeknownst that it was going to completely warp everything or change everything that we did. So we wanted to spend a little time talking about that because it does frame and focus how we're going to get ready for the future world of work, because it's such an opportunity for the lessons learned. So starting with you, Steve, let's talk a little bit about what are the characteristics of your employees or students in your experience, Lisa, who perform the best under the stress and the disruption that came with the pandemic?
Sure. So you could imagine in the car business, on the service side, it's production paid. On the new car side, it's sales. And our employees were stressed out about how are they going to provide for their families? How's the income going to come in? Well, at Willis, we developed a pay plan for all of our teams, especially in the service side. And we divided into 2 teams. And we had one team on 1 week, and I'm going to speak from the service side because we're taking care of our guest vehicles. And then the other team would come in the next week. And again, we lost 0 employees through the pandemic, so we're really at Willis proud of that.
That's great. So what would you say, Steve, were the characteristics of those of the employees, since you didn't lose any, but what do you think was the primary overall or generalized characteristic you saw from your employees in terms of being able to handle that disruption and chaos that was going on with the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question, but it's really hard. In our world, it's pay driven. Mm-hmm. So, they were all being taken care of, and they in fact, it was really nice. One of our team leaders made a plaque and provided it to Rich Willis and thanking them for really taking care of them through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Grace, what about you? What would you say in terms of the employees that handled the pandemic and the change and all of that? What kind of characteristics did they display?
Once again, we were lucky. We didn't lose anyone at Accumuld either. And working in an environment that the employees wore masks already, it wasn't that big of a leap. So the fact that they had some familiarity with the new changes that were required, I think that helped us. Also, just our environment, gowning up, circulation, better than a hospital. So all those things helped lower the stress, allowing them to be flexible with their schedules. So really, those employees that communicated to their supervisors what was going on with their families, and those supervisors that communicated with their employees, I think that open channel helped to build more trust. And the fact that they were getting paid compared to many people that they knew that weren't. So that security made a difference.
Great. Lisa, what did you observe from students who handled the disruption to their education?
Yeah, and I'd say it probably wasn't much different for some of our adults as it was with students, really the same characteristics. And I appreciated this question because I hadn't thought about that previously. I really do believe those, both students and staff who were willing to be adaptive and agile, to persevere through the challenges, to help problem solve. You know, we didn't have all the answers. In fact, in some cases, in my specific case, you know, we had been using an online platform at the secondary level, but not at the elementary level. And so all of a sudden, all of our elementary teachers had to learn an online platform, and we needed to do that in a environment that was virtual as well. So some of them, believe it or not, had a challenge even just logging onto Zoom. So those who did well and persevered through that and were willing to be adaptive and understand that they didn't have all the answers, and in some cases self-aware, self-management, they were successful. And I saw the same thing in our students. So those skills that we so often talk about as soft skills were really the important skills during the pandemic, and I would say amplified how important those skills are for the future as well.
Yeah, I think what we saw at Iowa Workforce Development was patience, which was not something I'm known for. I don't have a lot of patience, sadly. But my staff was working every day with people who were anxious and frustrated because of the size of changes they were going through. And so, they really sometimes just needed someone who was going to take a few minutes to talk to them personally to say, I hear you, I understand what you're going through, and I'm going to do everything I can to fix what I can fix within the control. So we really, really wanted our workforce to just demonstrate that compassion, that empathy, and the patience with folks who were not necessarily always the easiest people to deal with, and understandably so in those circumstances. So, Lisa, how would you say the pandemic has affected your workforce from a recruitment and retention standpoint? And what's been the impact and changes you've made moving forward?
Yeah, well, I do appreciate the reframing from the great resignation to the great reprioritization, because I think that's even part of when I think about that, in education as well. And so I do believe what we've seen, there are fewer young people who are going into education. So we talk a lot about schools that started the school year this year with, as I've traveled across the state in my new role, there's 15 open positions, 36 open positions in another district. People think right away that's because of the pandemic. And there is some of that some said, this just isn't for me any longer. But the other piece is there are fewer people going into education. And so how can we attract? I do think we need to really think about the attraction piece, and I really appreciate some of the laws that just took place this last legislative session. I don't believe it's enough yet. We need to continue to have that conversation about what more we can do. But the paraeducator grant, for example, allowing an alternative pathway into teaching will certainly help. And I've heard positives from across the state as I've been traveling. I also think that we need to, when we start thinking about retention, of course, we know that pay is one thing, but it's really even more than pay. It's about the culture. So as I was sitting listening already to this afternoon, and so connecting with that, what can we do in our schools to create an environment where people feel valued, they see that their work is valued, they have voice in that, and that's for our employees as well as for our families who we engage with, and also our students.
Grace, what lessons would you say that AccuMold has taken from the pandemic in terms of a hiring, recruitment, and retention standpoint?
I think one of the things that we're seeing is that we have more people interested in part-time. Those that had the opportunity to work from home during, and actually for us it was like 2.5 months, so it wasn't a very long experience for them. Value that work-life balance probably more than they did before the pandemic. And so we're having more employees ask, is there a part-time option? Can I work 30 hours a week and still maintain all my benefits? What else can I do? And so we've had to become more flexible with part-time opportunities and really re-look at, especially for our millenniums, what work looks like for them.
Some manufacturers I know, Grace, have moved to 4 10-hour shifts or even 3 12-hour and then a 4-hour shift. Have you done anything like that?
We have. We have implemented a 3-2-2-3 schedule, and that really helps us out with the weekends. So a person only works 2 weekends a month, and it's 3 days on, 12-hour days, 2 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off, kind of rotation.
Great. Steve, what about you? What have you learned or done?
Well, yes. Retention, we have a long list of employees who have been with Willis for a long time. Our problem with needing help is the growth of all of our departments. As I said before, most people are keeping their cars, maintaining their cars, and having to fix their cars, which is a more demand, let's just say, for technicians. So right now, or even support positions, like right now, currently we have 32 positions open within our fixed operations department. And we're trying to think, how can we go outside, I hate using this cliche, but how outside the box. But now it's if you go out to dinner or you go to a restaurant or a bar or whatever, and you meet somebody that you can see has talent, but they may not be in the right seat. So, we're willing to teach the trade and hire the attitude. And that has been successful in some of our positions.
So let's talk about the three of you. You're both leaders in your particular industries and among your own workforce. So what lessons have you as leaders learned that is going to impact the way you lead the future workforce that you're going to experience? Steve, we'll start with you.
Sure. I said it a minute ago, you got to take care of your employees. And one thing from the Willis organization is we want to provide the ultimate guest experience, but we also want to employ the ultimate employee experience, and that's just taking care of your people. And that is the lesson I have learned through all of this. Just take care of your people. Love on your employees.
Grace, what about you?
Well, one of the things that we've added is more stress breaker kind of opportunities, more team activities, pictures of grandkids and grandparents, just ways to bring people together. Book clubs, we do a lot of book clubs. Extreme Ownership is our current book club book. Mentoring, ways to connect people in a positive light. So I heard this best put in a church training program on how do we save our little churches. And one of the things they said is that people have work, they have home, but they need a third place. And they were saying that that third place is very much like Cheers, for those of you old enough to have watched that sitcom. And so we've reframed work to think about, how do we really make that collaboration experience one that you want to just keep coming back for, making it more interesting, more challenging, and more fun.
Well, like Marvin was telling me, one of the things that you do to try to bring people back to the workplace is that fear of missing out, or FOMO, as he said it. He's much more hip than I am, so of course he knows these acronyms. And I love Jocko Wilkerson. That's a great book if you haven't read it yet. Lisa, what about you? What have you learned as a leader?
Yeah, so as through the last few years, this is probably a term you've all heard of, but we've talked about this VUCA world. So that's the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity. That's the world that we live in now and will continue to live in. And if there's one thing that I know that's certain, it's that change is a constant. So as a leader, what that tells me is I need to make sure I have a vision and really communicate that vision, have fewer priorities, and make sure that I'm talking about that vision on a regular basis. I need to understand my people. For us, we're in a people business, so we need to know our people, we need to love on our people, we need to listen to our people. Culture, need to have an environment that's welcoming for everyone who walks through those doors. And then finally, when I think about that adaptability, we need to be able to be adaptable, not only myself, but if I model that it's okay to make mistakes. As I was looking at the data earlier and thinking about innovation in schools, we kind of say, hey, we need this exactly right. And so that stifles, in my opinion, that innovation. So how do we help students be able to learn that piece about an entrepreneurial mindset and still help them get to a place where we need them to know and be able to do certain tasks, but to not focus on right and wrong all the time, that there are different ways to get to a right answer.
Well, and one of the things I learned as a leader during the pandemic was when you're in the eye of the hurricane, or you are the eye of the hurricane as the leader, you have to remain calm at all times. And so you have got to develop an outlet where you can call and lose your mind so that you can then come back and say, okay, this is not that big of a deal, or we're going to get through it, or we know we were going to make some mistakes, and that's okay, we'll recover. But you've got to have that, you have to remain calm, because if you are anxious as the leader, then that only gets magnified in your workforce. And so it's really important that you figure out some good strategies to help you to do that. So last question that I want to talk to you about is, how do you as a leader of an organization build resiliency and flexibility that we know we need in our workforce based on what we've seen through the pandemic, that's really going to help us build that future workforce that we want it to be, move from that command and control to that creative aspect that we all aspire to get to? What have you, as a leader, plan to do to help you get there?
Well, in my new role, it's really helping administrators across the state think about how can we create. So for us, it'd be looking at professional learning and how can we create that time and space for it to be okay that we're growing when we're uncomfortable, right? And so making sure that we are risk takers, and that's okay, that we don't always have the exact right answer. It kind of connects with my last statement that in education that we historically have not been there. And so in order to help students have that critical mindset, that problem-solving mindset that we need to get away from, here's how you do it, here's the right way to do it, to there are multiple pathways to the right answer. And in fact, you may be teaching us something, and for our adults to be okay with, we don't know everything, but we may learn from our kids right there in the classroom.
Yeah, I love that. Grace?
Well, speaking about in the eye of the storm, I probably learned more, and in HR, it definitely felt like we were in the eye of the storm, figuring out what the policies and the rules were. And we have a very solid business continuity plan, so we had a whole section on this is what we're going to do with the pandemic. Well, so that wasn't exactly accurate. now going through it. But one of the things I learned was working back and forth with our legal team and our leaders. I had sent an email to our HR manufacturing managers in different companies in the Des Moines area. We have an HR managers group. And just saying, are you guys surviving? How is it going? And I got so many responses back saying, wow, you're the only person I got recognition from through this chaos. And just realizing how important recognition is when you are in that eye of the storm, and really applying that back to our company, saying, how can we make everybody here feel valued and know that their struggle is something we're right there with them.
And I'm sure that helped you build that resiliency and that flexibility into your workforce. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, everybody, as Mike Tyson would say, has a plan until you get punched in the face. So, you know. Steve.
I can concur with both what they just said. They pretty much answered it. But you know, take risk and value these our employees. You know, in my position as a service manager and the need of technicians, and we're trying to build our workforce. You know, we have to. You know, the old gearhead or dirty mechanic is that's far and few between. You know, we're looking for people that computers, because you can fix cars with software updates or modules. It's just crazy. So we're partnering with DMAC, all these trade schools across Iowa to take risk and with the men and women that have these interests in the technology side and even the auto side.
So we have room for just one more question. I'm going to throw this out. Talk about being flexible. We didn't plan for this, but I think you guys all bring up a good point. What are you doing today, start with you, Steve, to plan for the workforce you're going to have in 10 years?
Oh, wow. That's...
Flexibility is the key to air power, Steve. Come on.
Well, that's tough, and that's a really tough question in my business because we're so short-handed on people, men and women, you know, and it...
So helping build work-based learning programs and getting high school students into and aware of, that would be one thing, right?
We are in front of high school students. We do bring the high school students out, and we do give tours. But most of those high school students are already interested. But we are in front of them. And we're also, I hope I'm not in trouble for saying this, but we're also asking guidance counselors to push our youth to the trades. And I'm not just not just automotive, but plumbing, construction.
HVAC,
You know, the 2-year degree isn't all that bad, you know, and some of our technicians make well over $100,000 a year.
Yeah. Grace, I know you guys are doing a lot to get your future workforce ready.
So back in 2006, Roger Hargens, our president, and Steve Bohl, our vice president of finance, and Rob Denson met at the coffee shop down the street here, Cafe DM, and they came up with a scholarship program to build up the tool and die students and the robotics students at DMAC, and then worked with the governor. And so we are building, we've had about 90 students go through that program, and they're the foundation of our tool room and robotics staff. And this year we created a new program where we actually have looked at what jobs don't need a 4-year degree and how could we bring high school students into learning those positions. So the DOL has a student learner program, and we kicked that off with process technicians. So they actually come to AccuMold for 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. They work 2 hours a day learning how to be a process technician, and they're below 18. And you can only do this as part of the DOL student learner program. Otherwise, it's considered breaking child labor laws. And so that's part of our strategy. We've been doing, I don't know if any of you know Friendly Elementary School, but they start career fairs at kindergarten. So kindergarten through fifth grade, we go out every year. This was before the pandemic, and they're working at getting it started again. And we give a career fair on how to become a tool and die molder. I use Play-Doh and drawings and that kind of stuff. So we look at this as planting seeds. And I will give a tour to anyone. Last year we gave a tour to 60 grandparents who are former farmers in the area that are sunbirds in Texas. And they come back and they like to tour manufacturing facilities when they come. And so, not that I'm planning on hiring any of those grandparents, but I would be open to it. But I was going after the grandson and daughter reach. How can we get them to think that manufacturing isn't a Henry Ford dirty facility when ours is closer to a hospital than it is to a Henry Ford facility, or, way back when. So also extending the retirement age. Our oldest toolmaker was 79 before he unfortunately passed away. But Cirrus at Iowa State did a study last year and showed the available employees over the last 100 years in Iowa, in Minnesota, and in Florida. If you get a chance, go look that up. But Iowa basically has pretty much stayed the same in terms of the available population. So that forced us to look at how do we get younger workers and how do we get older workers? How do we rescope our definition of work and how our jobs are set up? And so that's what we're putting a lot of effort into now.
One of those tours that Grace was so gracious to give was to my youngest nephew, who is interested in manufacturing. So I'll give you an update later about where he's at. Lisa, how do we help our educators prepare for that future state of workforce? We've heard a lot about combining education and workforce. So what does that look like from an education perspective?
Yeah, it's again the tools in that professional learning. Like, how do we incorporate AI into classrooms? Which I would tell you, there's pockets of things going really well, and others that haven't even thought about how could that happen. I think about skills. So if you went to most schools across the state, they would have something like a portrait of a learner, a graduate, and really focused on those skills and what skills that not only do students need to be successful in the education, but it really goes beyond the K-12, and thinking about that from that kindergarten or preschool level on up. And then, there's lots of great programming in the state of Iowa when you start thinking about future ready. How do we help our teachers see how that can impact the classroom? So allowing students to be able to get out of math class and apply those skills that they're learning in math. Apprenticeships and job shadowing and all of that as well, but how can we take what they're learning in class and immediately help them see the relevance outside of school? And then finally, I would say it goes back to us having that mindset that it's okay to take risks and it's okay to say we don't know it all, and we need to partner with those businesses, so that public-private partnership is very important.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, Grace. Sure.
Another thing that's, I think, helped us is if you have not heard of the Teacher Extern program, this is where teachers come and work in your business for 6 weeks in the summer, paid for by the state. Mm-hmm. It is an excellent way to put moles in the high school and the grade school that are talking about your company. And for teachers who have never been out of the educational field to actually see how we use what they're teaching the students. And I would definitely recommend you sign up for that program. We do 2 teacher externs a year, and they do really valuable work. I had one run down the hallway a couple of years ago, and I'm like, oh no, is there a fire? What's wrong? You use this math theorem. We never knew anyone used it. She was just so excited she had to tell the other teachers about how we use math. But that is definitely a great program. And if you get a chance to go to the Wilk in Waukee, They are doing a great job getting kids prepared for the world of work. Just excellent. They come in professional with collared shirts and really doing meaningful work. And I think that's what's changed the perspective, is giving high school students, whether they do it in the classroom like with Orbis and Ankeny or at the business site like Waukees doing, really good programs.
I'm sure you'd agree that the value of teacher externships.
Yeah, I was thinking, wow, I wish I would have said that. So yeah, and I firsthand experience, we had teachers involved in teacher externships, and then what they learned in the summer and could bring back, and how they then revamped their curriculum and what happened in the classroom. 100%, yes.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being great panelists. Let's give Lisa and Grace and Steve a hand. Thank you.